record button. You're forwarded from listserv. All right, welcome everyone to today's event entitled Mapping Customer Experience and Value Streams. I'm pleased to introduce our guest speaker, Barclay Rae, who probably doesn't need any introductions. Barclay is a staple in our industry. He's an award-winning author and speaker. You usually find him at most ITSM conferences, featured as a keynote speaker. His accomplishments include co-architecting ITIL 4 and creating certification standards with the Service Desk Institute. You can also catch him and Ian Aitchison on their podcast, Enterprise Digital Podcast, which honestly is on my short list of must listen to podcasts. You can follow him on social media as well at Barclay Rae or visit barclayrae.com. I'm extremely fortunate enough to bring him here today to talk to you. A little bit about the format of today's presentation. The presentation itself will last anywhere between 40-45 minutes with time left over for Q&A. If you have a question you want to ask, please put it in the Q&A window. Let's reserve the chat for talking amongst ourselves and with each other, but please use the Q&A to ask your question. If you want to ask your question live, use the hand raise feature to let me know that you want to ask a question. I'll take you off mute, but please, when you're done with your question, put yourself back on mute. We encourage you to talk with each other. That's what the chat window's for. There's a lot of conversations usually happens in the chat. I'll make the chat transcripts available as part of the recording package as well. And as usual, this recording or this event is being recorded and it will be available on the EDUCAUSE ITSM website within 5 business days. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Barclay.
Mitchell, thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to present to you guys today. I'm really delighted to be here. It's a sunny early evening in London where I'm sitting. It would be nice to be in Vegas or somewhere in California, but we're all quite sunny. So wherever you are, I hope you enjoy the next little discussion and session. I'm going to be talking, as Mitchell said, about customer experience and value streams. There's a lot being said about this at the moment, whether it's about customer experience, different types of experience management, employee experience, digital experience, experience level agreements, and so on. And then the whole value streams thing has really come out from over the last few years, coming from DevOps, IT for IT, ITIL 4, a whole number of other areas where we've really focused on the end-to-end approach across the organization. And I really want to try and bring that home in this session to really talk about what we need to do holistically to be successful with service management. And so we'll try and incorporate a number of aspects into that, as well as giving you as much as I can on the value stream side. I was the lead editor on the Create, Deliver, Support publication in ITIL 4, where half of that book was about a whole pile of stuff that I'm really pleased that we got into ITIL about, management styles, servant leadership, employee experience, a whole number of things. The second half was about value streams. We had a lot of discussion as to how that would be formatted and so on, and I think there's still a number of ways to look at that and do that, and I take quite a simplistic view to start with. There's plenty of complexity to be discovered when you start doing this kind of work, but I like to get people thinking about what the core things are that we're trying to do with this and what kind of value benefits we're going to get out of it. So I will be going around a number of different areas, and we'll welcome your questions and feedback as we go, or coming at the end. But it's really up for discussion, because this is something that's not done. It's still evolving. We're still doing this. We're still developing how to make it work, and there are other things that are now coming into that around about what we do with automation, AI, and so on, how we manage in a changing working environment, and so on. So I'm going to try and give you as much of that as I can in the next 40 minutes or so. I look forward to your feedback on that. I won't dwell on my bio, just as Mitchell mentioned. It's there, lots of things that I do involved. I'm still involved with the ongoing ITIL program, maybe not so much writing, although I've just authored one of the one-day courses, but really more about the direction of it, if you like. So I'm very pleased still to be doing that, although ITIL is not everything about what I do. It's there, and it's part of what we all do, I guess. This is the agenda, and I put it in this sort of circular. I like using this model these days rather than just having a kind of linear agenda. There are quite a lot of different areas that I'm going to dip in and out of. So I'm not going to start with questions, but questions will come up as we go. Basically, you know, I'll be trying to explain what we mean by value streams, what we mean by customer journeys, what we do with mapping and why we would be doing it, hopefully give you some practical tips and a sense of where this can go in terms of outcomes. So as you can imagine, there's quite a lot to cover in that, but I deliberately do like to look at it in the round. I don't like really just saying, well, let's just look at journey mapping without thinking about where that fits in. And I think there's a little bit of a danger of that at the moment with things like where we start talking about XLAs and where we're going with them, because on their own, you know, they're useful. The same as most artifacts within service management, they're useful, but you really need to see them in context. So it'll be a little bit of a circular journey, this one, I think, as we go. I always like to remind ourselves when we start looking at any of these areas that what it is that we're actually doing in service management, and service management in the broadest sense, not just IT service management, but you know, what are we doing when we're delivering any type of service? And I have these three questions that I always take to the C-level, or the, you know, the CIO, CTO, whatever, CEO, if I can. You know, are we delivering what our customers need? Do we know exactly what is required that we are delivering? Can we demonstrate that in terms of value? And if we then go and ask our customers and our users whether or not we've achieved that value, we are delivering it, would they agree? And you might think, well, these are three quite simple and obvious questions. But once you actually think about them, they are quite difficult to define and really clarify and understand. Because the first one, do we deliver what our customers need? Well, in order to answer that question, we need to be sure that we have had discussion or agreement or engagement to be clear what our customer or our business needs. And so much of what we've done over the last 20, 30 years in terms of measurement and metrics and, you know, quality, all the things we've done for the best reasons to try and improve, haven't always been based on, you know, that simple going to talk or listen to your customers and finding out what it is that they really want from you, what do they need from you, what do they think is valuable, and how do we turn the information that we might have about what we're doing into value, not just this is what we're doing. We're great at saying how many, how much, how often, availability, mean time to this and that. Doesn't mean anything really to our customers or our businesses, our organizations, whoever we're working for. And in the higher education sector, where I've actually spent quite a lot of time working, I think it's a fascinating area because you have very different profiles of stakeholders, you know, from your students to your academics to your administration people and so on, and the way that they all work in different silos. The really challenging thing about these three questions is it's part of a bit of research I did a few years ago with probably the best part of about 600 CIOs, and there was a very small percentage of them could actually answer these questions. You know, I think it was less than 30% could say yes. And if you can't answer number one, then forget 2 and 3. You know, it's like, well, do we have a clear definition of what the expectation is of what we're going to deliver and how that is reflected in terms of value? And are we confirming that? Have our customers or organizations confirmed it? And I've had that conversation many times with IT directors, CIOs, whatever, where they've kind of gone, do you know, we haven't really thought this one through. We haven't really thought exactly what, we haven't got this defined or understood or engaged with our customers, for want of a better word, to be really sure that we are, you know, we know what we're doing. We know what we're doing with the organization, but is that actually what it needs in order to be successful? So that kind of leads on to a number of questions or activities, I think. I mean, I think this is the basis for service management. You know, we have to discover and engage and then provide and deliver and measure, report, modify, change, etc., and then present that information, turn it into something that's tangible. I think that sometimes the final hurdle where we fall down, because we do all this stuff and then we don't really present it in a way that can be understood and consumed and appreciated by your end users, because it's still in our language. So there's quite a lot of background there that I just really like to clarify, particularly when we start thinking about value streams. What do we mean by that? What is a value stream, and how do we start to understand what's involved in it? Something that's also really important for me is taxonomy. And if any kind of project or initiative or transformation, I think it's absolutely essential to have a good definition at the start of what we mean by certain terms. And what I've got here, I'm not going to go through this slide, but you have access to it, that you can start to think about some of these things. Some of them you obviously really know very well. Others might be new ideas in our organizations. But as an example, I mean, it hit me a few years ago when somebody asked me to do a service catalog project, and I've been doing that for some years anyway, but I kind of went into the organization and spent the first few days just asking the various managers and leaders what they thought a service catalog was, and I came back with more definitions than there were actually managers, because there was a lot of different misunderstanding around those things. So when we start talking about value streams and value chains and touch points and journey mapping and so on, we really have to be very clear what we are talking about. If in doubt, I would always default up in terms of definition, you know, that says, well, if we don't really, service catalog is a good example because there's different elements and views of that, but at the high level, it's a list of a set of data around about what services we deliver. Then you have different views. And in the sense of value streams and value chains, what we're talking about is the end-to-end process, not the individual silo process. But you know, take any of these on board that you want to use as we go. I think it's absolutely imperative that we make sure that we've got an agreed taxonomy. It's day one on the workshops for me is to say, right, are we all happy with these definitions? And if not, then let's get that out, but let's make sure we're all agreeing on what it is that we're talking about here, because you end up going down a lot of different wormholes with that. Excuse me. So my first simple image, and I think images are good and stories are good. When I express ideas about things and get it from one brain to another, the best way is to try and force people to think about it rather than just give them lots of data. And when we're talking about value streams and customer journeys, if you think about a theatre, think about going to the theatre to see a show. It might be a musical, it might be a play, whatever. But there's, if you like, there's very much a definition there. And then the curtain, in the theatre, it's called a proscenium stage, which basically means that there's a place where the show is presented, and in front of house and back of house. Front of house is where you are as a customer, in the audience. You bought a ticket, you've gone in, you've had a drink at the bar, maybe a snack, you've been shown to your seat, you sit down, you then watch the show, you consume the content of the show. And you know that your experience of that will be good, bad, or indifferent, depending on a whole number of things. But there's two aspects of it. One is how you've been brought in and how you've been shown and what that experience is like of actually consuming. And then secondly, what the services are and whether what the show is actually doing for you. Is it delivering something that makes you happy, challenges you, fulfills you? There's the nice music, dancing, good acting, and so on. What's the lighting like? Behind the scenes in the theatre, you've got lots of people who are doing technical roles to make sure the lights, the sound, the orchestra, all those things are there. So there's very much that sense of performance and doing stuff, and then sitting out there actually consuming it. And that's a very simple analogy to what we're talking about with customer experience and value streams when we're talking about our technology world. There's two ways of looking at it. There's what is actually presented and consumed by the user, and they have various ways into that in terms of how they access it through devices or whatever. There's choice, there's options in terms of different types of device or different types of service, and then they have the experience of being in the theatre, being there in the room when it happens, if you've seen Hamilton and so on. And then behind the scenes is all this other stuff going on that you don't see, but it's still really important to making sure that the thing works. And those two would be what I would equate to the customer experience part, and then the value streams behind the scene, the musicians' value stream, the dancers, the actors, the stagehands, the techs, and also people like, the people who run the theatre in terms of finance and catering and all those kind of things. That's a very simple front of house, back of house analogy, but I hope it kind of helps to shine a light a little bit on what we're talking about here for you. And we'll sort of take that forward a little bit as we go. The other thing, when we're talking about value, when we actually talk about the value of our services, how do we capture what that is? And the analogy here, and this is one that's actually we put into, I think, Item 4 in the foundation, but there's this idea of a network, a rail network, say. So you've got, it's not an exact map of the UK, but that's the main lines in the UK. A rail network is lots of track, stations, points, technical stuff about how it all works. On its own, it's useless. It doesn't deliver anything. It costs a lot of money. It requires a lot of people to manage, to build, manage, maintain, etc. But there's no value in that. And you could equate that to our infrastructure and our technical capability, platforms, infrastructure, applications, devices, all of those things that are there. The value happens when that technology is used. In the same way that the value for the railways happens when a train runs across the network. That's the bit that where we talk about this in Item 4 and other areas as well, co-creation. It's not just us providing something, it's also the consumer actually using it, experiencing it. So there's the delivery of the infrastructure, there's the delivery of what we're actually doing. We're going from one place to another. Maybe it's an express train, where we might expect to have certain types of service, more comfort, more, they've got a coffee shop or whatever. Or if it's a commuter train, well, we just want to get there quickly, so it's maybe not as comfortable, but it's still doing the job, and so on. Freight trains, etc. That's where the value is. It's getting people or freight from one place to another in time and safely, and so on. That's the value bit. And when we talk about, again, sort of front of house and back of house, if we're going to measure the value of our services, we've got to do both. We've got to measure what the experience is like when we actually are on the train, when we get from A to B, do we get there in time? Was it a pleasant experience or not? But we've also got to measure what goes on behind the scenes to make that work in terms of engineers and train drivers and schedules and points and all that kind of stuff. Those things go on. And if you think about the railway approach, when we started really measuring the railway's success a few years ago, certainly in this country, it was done really badly at first because it was based on things just like the availability of the network and stuff, and when the trains started but maybe didn't finish, and a whole lot of that. Whereas now it is much more about, yes, has it achieved what it was expected to do, and what was the experience like? So people get asked or sent surveys, or ways of actually indicating that they've had a good time. And so the value of the whole system is measured by looking at both areas, but also particularly looking at that part where it is consumed and used. So yes, we can measure whether the railway network is available and potentially available to be used, but the real value is when we actually have somebody working across it on a train. Has that been a good experience? Has it worked for them, and so on? And that's why when we start to talk about measuring our values, we've got to think about it from an internal and external perspective. We've got to look at the workings of our processes, our tools, our capabilities, but also we've got to try and track the experience against that as it's actually used and consumed. I hope that's fairly straightforward. I've got some pretty trains there, which I should have moved on to before. But yeah, it's not just the network, it's the trains running on the network. It's not just it's the consumption and use by our users. And I hope that's the reason it might, why didn't we talk about this 20 years ago? Well, maybe we did, maybe we didn't. But the thing is that our thinking has moved on from just the success of what we do, the SLA model, which is, was it available? Did we meet a certain target or not? That's useful, but it's not enough. It's got to be, was it available? Did it meet a certain target of did we ask the people actually using it? Did it do what they needed? And was it a decent experience? That additional level needs to be delivered as well. And the value stream part is, just to sort of round that off, is more than just our definition of process. No user cares about our process. They don't care about incident management and problem and all those things. They just want to know what happens when they raise a particular ticket, or they make a request, or they've got a particular issue. What goes on behind the scenes, behind the curtain, behind the proscenium? Don't care. But we've got to measure that, and we've got to measure both. That effectively is a little bit of background to that. So when we talk about, customer journey mapping, what is it really like? And I think the other thing as well is that from the point of view of how we do this is an established approach in many other industries like retail, hotels, etc. They've been doing this for years. People who do mystery shopping or mystery hotel staying and all sorts of things. They actually just walk through. They don't care about what's going on. They're not coming in to measure the effectiveness of the processes of the organization. There'll be people doing that as well, but they are just doing it purely from the experience point of view. And the value in this comes from how you're able to pull those things together. That is the difficult bit, because we don't suddenly have all these teams of people that are going to go and do value stream mapping, and people are going to do customer journey mapping, and other teams of people are going to pull them all together. We need to find ways of doing that ourselves that are simple and effective. Obviously, if we're organizations of scale, we might have people doing that, or we might bring in people or suppliers or whatever to help us to do that. But I think that's the challenge. The challenge is, I think most people would get the things that I've been saying up to now and think, yes, we should be doing that, but actually it sounds like quite a difficult thing to do. And that's where I want to bring in some other ideas about the wider picture of what we're doing and how, because I think sometimes it can seem a little bit daunting when you start looking at this stuff and go, well, we just don't have time to do that. And well, I guess we still need to do it. Okay, so that's the sort of summary of that there. The organization behind the scenes, which would be our value stream mapping, and then the user part of it, which is much more around the customer journey mapping. I can't actually see my own screen there. When we talk about value streams, there is still quite a bit of confusion, particularly because we have the concept of a value chain, and we also talk about supply chain as well, and I think we can get a bit bogged down with that. I think simply when we talk about a value stream, we're talking about a joined up set of activities, very often processes, some of them related directly, some of them maybe less so. But that, you know, when we go and we look at it from the outside in, we say, right, well, it is, you know, order to deploy, or whatever it is, report to correct. Those are the things that came out of things like IT for IT that just said there are some core activities that happen and they go across the organization, and we have to make sure that we understand that from a consumer's point of view, they only see that. Value stream, I think we can think of quite simply. I think we can just look at it from that. We don't have to get too bogged down in trying to over-engineer it. It's really just understanding how we work behind the scenes. We need to look at our processes, practices, etc., all the things that are involved in delivering that. And I personally prefer to drive it from the point of view of, let's look at the customer journey, let's look at some elements of the outcomes and the activities, without making it necessarily a huge separate activity. But we have to look at the processes that go across from the order to the deploy. And I think that to some extent it's something that we have been starting to do. So my way into this is just to say, right, well, we don't need to suddenly spin up a whole new team of people. Great if we could, but what have we already been doing, and how can we take that to the next level? And I tend to refer to the whole area, this whole area, as service mapping, which is to say, well, it is the value stream and it is the customer journey, but what is the service? First of all, do we understand enough about the components of that? And that's where I think we can start to pull together, you know, we can do workshops, we can do a number of activities that will really help us to define this kind of stuff. This is a very simple model that I use to get people thinking about service cataloging, which is probably a couple of steps back from what we're trying to do with value stream mapping, but I think it's really helpful. You can tell me later if you think it is or not. And this is where we say, right, well, what are our services? And what would be the attributes of those services if we started to pull them together? And you can see if we had these 4 services, and you know, there's a number of potential attributes on the left-hand side: the name, the business owner, the service owner, what the SLA might be, what the model is in terms of who does what, and the support model, users, suppliers, and so on. Particularly things like components, which are the, if you like, the bits of technology and perhaps process that we use to deliver that. So that's the kind of way into the configuration management side and other aspects of that. Now we tend to do this and look at it from a perspective where these are the things that are highlighted there in that sort of green teal are the ones that are difficult, the ones that we, you know, 9 times out of 10 when I've done this with an organization, we spend a day identifying what the services are, validate that list of attributes, and then we start to populate it. And they always come back and say, right, well, we're getting through this, but we haven't got it complete, and we're struggling to find the business owner and the service owner. We're not really sure about the model and components to and fro. And you know, that starts to give you a sense that it's going across various teams. It's not just something we can go, right, well, here we are in service management, boom, we understand all. That's the point. The point is that we pull it all together. By doing this, we understand it better. And of course, the activity really is aimed at trying to define this kind of information. that says it does pull people in. The fact that it's difficult to find the service owner is a real clue with this, because people kind of go, well, that's great, you're doing that work over there, I'm over here, I'm not part of that. But it turns out they are part of it. Either they're part of the supply chain of it, or they actually might end up owning the whole value stream. It's the, I do see, the reason I'm going into this is because I do see this as a progression. Most people are starting to do this or doing this quite maturely. That's a way into value stream mapping, because you've started to identify the various components of that. You still need to put it up and actually see the beginning to end, because this isn't a flow, if you like. This is a fixed set of data, but it's a good start. And if you are doing this already, I think that's really helpful. If you haven't done this, then you'll probably find value stream mapping quite challenging. And I just, you know, as a general recommendation, would say this is a good sort of stepping stone, halfway house towards it, if you're moving towards getting that kind of information, pulling it together, put it that way. There's lots of stuff, lots of levels of detail, so I won't go in, but you know, it does give you a picture of the different owners and different parties in the service chain of doing this, if you like. When we go on to talk about value stream mapping, then we do need to have this, you know, get together in the room with lots of bits of paper and post-its and walking through the time scale and understanding what's happening and where the delays are and so on. From our perspective, that's something that we just need to do. I do think that we can do more on that. We can obviously, this is the sort of thing that organizations start to produce about different types of touch points, and touch points is one of the values in the taxonomy earlier, which is, you know, where people actually engage, where users will actually engage, whether that's digitally, physically, voice or whatever, or with a process. So you can start to build up that information internally. Just going to go on. But what ideally what you would start to do then is build up for some of your processes as they are, and probably are as in silos at the moment. You know, that you start to work through what happens at different times in those processes as they engage, and maybe identify some points where it's not working from your perspective. Fair enough, that gives you a good sort of end-to-end picture. It's still not the outside-in view, but it's still one that will give you some value. And I think that's something that, as an activity, we can all kind of work towards doing, without it becoming a huge. I've seen it in many organizations the last sort of 3-4 years, where there's armies of consultants come in and say, right, we're value streaming everything, and we've got value streams for going to the toilet, and we've got value streams for coffee making, and just too much. You know, I think we need to be sensible and say, what are the things that we do? How do we look at it from beginning to end? How does that start to relate to the processes that we've got? I think that you know, and then we can start to pick up more information if we start to combine that. And this is where we would be bringing the two together. I will go on to this in a bit more detail. The idea being, if we bring in experience, emotional response, you know, what do people actually feel at different parts of that phase? So they might start with a good expectation, they might get a bit confused in the way that they're dealt with, and then they get angry in the middle when nothing's happening. It gets fixed, they're relieved but disappointed, so it gets done, and they actually don't fill out a survey, so you don't know that they've been unhappy through the process. This is a very simple way of pulling these two together, and it's very high level, probably quite difficult to achieve. But again, I'm just trying to give you a picture of how these things might come together as we go. One other thing that I did mention, touch points, which is, that's the point where value is co-created or it's lost. You know, we talk about value leakage in ITIL 4, so there's an opportunity where, you know, a service person is talking to a customer, or there's an interaction online. That's the moment when happiness happens, or frustration and anger. So thinking about those carefully as to in the retail or the hotel environment, it's the moments, touch points are when you come into the hotel lobby and you go to the desk to check in, and there's a person there, and how much they know about you, what they need to know, what happens in that transaction. You go to the next person, do they have that same knowledge, etc. So we need to find ways of capturing that data. And building it into our picture. So if we can start to understand what the touch point is and what the experience is at any of these touch points, maybe we build in some information about what the trigger is in terms of starting that or blocking it, getting in the way, and what is our process behind the scenes to actually deliver that. We will get some composite value coming through from that. These are some questions that you might ask along the way. And again, I like to kind of keep this quite simple. There are many mapping models that go way into too much detail too quickly, in my view. But, you know, I suppose it depends on what your organization wants to do. I would always be advising starting small and testing and, you know, getting there rather than, okay, let's dive into this and put everybody through a 2-week program before we've even started. One thing is that what comes out of all this? What's the output? I'm asking our first 3 questions again. Are we delivering what our customers need? Can we demonstrate that in terms of value? Would they agree? You go to the airport, you don't want to see all this stuff. You know, you don't want to know what the pilot's wearing, or well, maybe you do, but all the kind of behind the scenes stuff, the back house stuff, you just want to know when the plane's going to arrive or when it's going to leave or when it's going to take off. And that, I think, is going to, we're going to take that forward in our thinking about what we do with the outcome of this. Because one question people keep coming up to me and saying, right, well, yeah, we get the fact that we should be thinking end to end and doing all this stuff, but what do we get out of it? What does it do for us? And the simple answer would be that it helps us to see the full picture of what we're doing and do something about it. Be able to make changes where they're needed in a way that we might not have been able to see that before. So my, I thought I updated the format of that. Yeah, sorry. The idea being that we need to combine both our experience metrics and our results metrics in the way we talked about front of house and back of house. And one particular area in this I think is really useful to consider is outcomes. We've got the experience where people are happy, that they enjoy what they've done, they make them feel good. Maybe yes, maybe no. Did we achieve what we were actually there to do? And that's a big one, I think, in terms of our thinking about targets and performance and SLAs and XLAs and so on. It's not just, you know, the experience is great, don't get me wrong, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't measure experience management. We should measure outcomes as well, and we don't really do that. We talk about what we've done, our performance, what it's cost, and how much time and all, but in terms of what that's actually delivered. So there's this concept of outcomes and maybe standard outcome types. We used to call them moments of truth, the moment when it's the touch point when the magic happens, when the service is consumed. And that can, you know, you can have a service available 24/7, but it's actually used at this particular time. Did it work at that time? The test of, you build a bridge, you know, you spend millions, billions of dollars building a bridge. The moment of truth is when the first car goes across it. You know, does it plunge into the abyss or does it get to the other side fine? And that really is the test of what we're doing, the outcome of it, not just the capability. And I like to think about how we might start to quantify different types of service outcomes. There's examples there, and then build that into our reporting. Now the next slide is quite busy, but it's there to try and help you to think about how we can combine the data that we get from experience data, outcome data, and value stream, our performance mapping and so on. And it's a simple model that's based on scorecard, weighting, and combining different types of data. And it's just to give you a sense of what's possible. But customer experience, employee experience, our practices, and then the business outcome. And the only bit you really need to talk to the customer about is the weighting. What do they think is most important? And generally that tends to be the outcome first, and then maybe the experience. And if you've done everything okay, then it's 100%. But if you've maybe not quite made it on the customer experience but hit the outcome, to me that's still not bad. That's still quite good, and that would help us to be able to use data properly to answer those first three questions that we talked about in the first couple of slides. Obviously, if we're not meeting the outcome, that's key. That's really important. We haven't done what the business needs from us, and so on. So that's a little bit about where we can go with this kind of stuff, and it's probably still. I've done this with many organizations over the years in different formats. It does work. It just does take a little bit of time. I just wanted to mention finally, in terms of the context of this, this is something I put together a few years ago, which is not a model, it's not a framework. It's about how we approach doing service management and making it successful. And it's completely about all these things, about engaging and listening, building up a structure of services, and what we need to do behind the scenes to make it work. Supporting our point of contact, usually the service desk, getting things like problem management, the quality part of it working, so that we're not constantly reinventing the wheel, and other things like reporting, but also getting people working together and thinking about the marketing side. And these steps, I think, have been used on a number of projects over the years, that they kind of work. You can build things in. I've updated it now to be much more broader than just, if you like, service management, and how we make sustainable improvements that last, by getting people on board, by engaging with them and listening, not just talking to them, doing all the things that we've talked about. And I put this together into a little template, again, that you can use in the slides, that just says, where are we now with these things? On the what here, it's the types of activity that we might be doing. And I've done this in workshops recently, and actually, once people start thinking about it, well, what do we need to do long term to make this work? And what would be our practical steps towards that? Where are we now? Identify some simple tests for that. So that's just a quick run through a whole number of areas and aspects of what we can do with mapping, with customer experience, with what we think about value streams. I think overall we shouldn't over-engineer them. I think we should certainly try to start simple and start at the strategic level. We'll always get detail, we'll always get complexity, and be still fixed, have our eyes fixed on the long-term goal of, are we delivering what our organizations need? Can we turn that into value? And can we also present it in a way that actually works for them, that they can get some sense from there? I think we're probably a little bit over time. Apologies, Mitchell, but
okay. Yeah, we have one question in the queue here. We have, let's see, 9:47. So we've got like maybe time for a couple questions, but we'll start with the one that's in the queue. What is a good method to determine whether an area is worth the investment in doing a journey map?
It's a good question. I would put a question, but I'm a consultant, so I ask questions. But the question would be, who do you think, when you talk about worth it, who would the worth relate to?
Feel free. We've got a small enough crowd that if you want to raise your hand, I'll take you off mute and you want to clarify your question. Happy to do that. You're just going by number, so it's 117450.
I'm meaning it as a probably more as a
Rhetorical.
As a precursor to answering that as well. But to me, it's like, well, the two questions are, the worth is going to either be for the business that you're supporting, and or the users that you're relating to. So
yeah,
the background to all of this has got to be that we're going to be out there. I did have this.
By the way, he's off mute if you want to just have a.
All right. So
dialogue.
Can you hear me, Mitch?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Can you? I guess it's Barclay. Can you repeat your question? I guess your question. I think it was who does it matter to?
that's kind of my answer, is that
Yeah.
the value is in, you know, well, who's important here, and usually that's the business, and usually that's the users. So it would be, I don't know, you know, the various faculty level people, or that, you know, that you're engaging with. It wouldn't be a question that I think that IT on their own would answer.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the use case that I'm working with, it's like there's an advising transformation going on at my institution, and I've just been handed a strategy to kind of work with, but I know there hasn't been any journey mapping done, and it's kind of like, I think the case should be made that should be done, and we have a group that can do that. But that's, so I think it's probably worth the investment if it's going to improve the advising experience for the student. So I think that does matter.
Absolutely. I mean, I think,
yeah,
my point here is very much that we do a lot of this stuff to our businesses and our users and our organizations rather than with them. So, you know, you get people coming in going, oh yeah, the latest thing is mapping value streams. Let's do that to the organization. And actually, I think my point is there's quite a lot of the stuff that we're already working towards. There's more that we need to do to really understand where the value is. But I don't think we need to go completely off the scale in, you know, over engineering that. I think the main thing that tends to get missed is actually talking and listening to people who use the system or service in the future, and those that will benefit from the use of it and the consumption of it. And too often that just doesn't happen. It's just far too much, oh, well, we're doing this now, we're going this way. Have we actually talked to the people who are going to use it? Is it going to be a value? Right. Do we understand what's important to them and what's bothering them and what they need?
Those are some questions I'll ask. Thank you.
And, you know, to provide context, we've done some journey mappings with our customers as part of a portal redesign experience. And it's very, very interesting looking at from the experience using our service portal from the customer perspective and not from redesigning solely from an IT perspective. And so that's really helped kind of map the journey from the point of entry through the different touch points to the conclusion, right? Which usually is that survey at the end to find out how did we do, right? So, and then there's that feedback loop that goes back through that whole value stream. So that's determined our priorities based on what's currently in the pipeline of our projects. So any other questions? We got a couple minutes. Absolutely outside in perspective. Thanks, Patty. We got time for maybe one more question. All right, that's fair. I will give you your time back. Let me just kind of wrap up here. So, sorry. So Stephen has a question. So he's asking, this is his first real foray into this, as I started right in time for COVID and went directly into a change management role for a SIS, so a student information system overhaul. All that to say, how do I start the process in the team?
What is the team that you're in, Stephen?
So imagining he's referring to the change management team, maybe the analyst and the cab. Would that be fair to assume that, Stephen? I can take you off mute if you want to talk.
Yeah, so I'm actually our help desk essentially manager for our IT team for the campus, but we branch into, you know, our fingers are in everything essentially. So I'm just haven't had that opportunity to really sit down and start this whole process in 3 years I've been here. So this summer is kind of my first opportunity to do so.
Okay, so I mean, I think there's some simple ways in, and I can pass on to Mitchell. And I've got a very simple couple of page prompt or document that you can use for fact finding with end users to just try and determine. Again, we've tended to go off and be very IT focused when we try and let's go and talk to our users. Listening to them is more important, and it's more important from a relationship point of view as well, because they feel that they're being heard. So ask them more open questions. Ask them what's important to them about the work that they do and where the technology fits in with that. What things you might be able to do better. What would be a good measure of your success? You know, is it something where, you know, you have a get together every couple of weeks, or you phone them every Friday, or I don't know, they fill out a form, whatever it is. But a big part of that is the listening part, and actually just saying, you know, just tell us about your experience of using our services, good or bad, and you know, we're here to listen and learn and do something with it. That's a very good place to start, for two reasons. One, because it starts to give you a real hands-on feel of what's important, and if you do a number of them, you'll start to build up a picture of what people are thinking out there. But secondly, and more importantly, you're really drilling in on the relationships at a good level, where you can start to test a few things with those people, you know, and go back and say, well, we'll do it this way, or we're going to try it, rather than everything done from the center and then we'll push it out, if you like. So that to me would be a good place to just go and talk and listen to your end users. Not in the thing that I think is really important about BRM, relationship management, is that it's not in a project scenario and it's not in an incident scenario. So in an incident scenario, things on fire, you got to sort it out, people are frustrated, whatever. In a project scenario, we're going to get this thing done, and it's neither of those. It's like just normal working. What's good, what's not so good, what do we need to fix, blah, blah. That really makes a difference, and you put them at ease and you start to build a relationship. That would be the starting point, and I can make that available to Mitchell. And
Barclay, if you have any sort of templates that the group would find useful, I'll make that part of the recording package. So, okay, sure. So we're at the end of the hour here. Thanks, Barclay, for your time. His contact information can be found on the slide deck. At the end, as soon as I end the meeting, you'll get a survey. Please take the survey. It helps us to figure out if we're delivering value on these events and how we can make them better for you. Reminder that the chat transcripts and the recording, the presentation, and any other documents that we provide will be available within 5 business days on the EDUCAUSE ITSM CG website. If you would like to present on a topic, I always say, if you've got a voice, I've got a stage, reach out to me. You have my contact information. I'll help you put together an event like this where you can present on a topic of interest. And again, just thank you everyone for taking your time out today, and Barclay, appreciate your time, and everyone have a wonderful week.
Thank you everybody for listening. Yeah,
absolutely. Bye everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye.